What's good, streaming people? This is the SEC Super Preview, and this Saturday will be #1 Alabama traveling to College Station to take on number 24 Texas A&M. Alongside, as always, Brady Quinn. I'm Tommy Tran. And Brady, first let's talk about Texas A&M. The scheduling god's doing them no favors right now. For the second time already in 6 games, the #1 team in the country.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. We knew how hard their schedule was going to be coming into the season. I don't think we knew it was going to include having to play the #1 team in the country twice along that scale. But look, Texas A&M has a shot. It's a tough environment to go play in, and I do believe this is going to be Alabama's toughest opponent they've played yet this season, so they should be challenged in this matchup. The problem is this. Kellen Mond, we just saw, he's having a decent season. He's improved from what we saw last year. The problem is 4 out of the 5 games this year, he's turned the football over. When you're facing a team like Alabama that can put up as many points as they can, you can't afford to give them any additional possessions, any additional motivation in this one. So that's something that Kellen Mond has to clean up in this game. He can't afford to turn over the football. On the flip side, defensively, this A&M defense can stop the run. The problem is that hasn't been what's made Alabama so prolific so far this year. It's been their passing attack. And when you look at all the wide receivers you've got to try to cover, I mean, they're averaging over 380 yards per game right now. It's tough to stop. And they've been good against the pass, but A&M hasn't seen a passing attack like what they're going to see from Alabama this season. So it's going to be tough to make them one-dimensional. I think they can do that. The problem is when you look at this matchup again, Tua's playing at such a high level. 23 touchdowns, no interceptions, all that talent on the outside. I just don't see any way that A&M's going to be able to keep this one close.
You talk about Tua Tagovailoa and those group of wide receivers. If you're Mike Elko, though, how do you plan to at least try to attack early on to hopefully contain Bama?
Well, it's hard to throw the football when you're laying on your back. So you got to figure out different ways of mixing up your pressure looks and mixing up your coverage looks. And I would go back and look at that national championship game and look at what Brett Venables did at Clemson and say, okay, this is how they went about trying to attack this offense because it was effective. You can tell Tua Tagovailoa was flustered through a number of interceptions in that game. And you could tell he lacked confidence, too, with where he was even going with the football. So you got to take a page out of the playbook of another team you already faced this year, another team that you watched have success versus them last year. The only caveat to that is Steve Sarkisian now is the play caller for this Alabama team. That wasn't the case last year. So a little bit different scheme. I think it's why you see them relying more heavily, too, throwing the football. It's something that Steve Sarkisian feels comfortable with. He did it last year with the Atlanta Falcons, put up prolific numbers in that passing attack as opposed to, running the football quite as much. And I think he's doing the same thing with Alabama because he knows that's what the strength of this team is.
All right, Brady, sit tight. Great insight from you. Let's welcome to the conversation Gary Danielson, who will be part of the broadcast team SEC on CBS. And Gary, there's some familiarity, of course, with these two teams, at least a new rivalry this decade. You got Texas A&M. They got the win in 2012. Since then, it's been Bama 6 straight since that loss, and you've called many of those games. Is there a common theme here with Bama's dominance?
I would say since that loss, once A&M kind of lost their high-level talent, they had, multiple #1 draft picks in the offensive line that they were able to depend on, and they had a couple of defensive linemen that were highly drafted. It just seems like the talent level dropped for A&M for a while, and I think that's why they had a coaching change. A&M came into the league with Kevin Sumlin kind of featuring the spread finesse game, and I think they're trying to retool it now to not just be a spread team. Everybody runs a spread now, but also be a little bit more physical on the offense and defensive lines. They've gone through 4 or 5 #1 draft picks in the offensive line, and they're just starting to get back to that talent level. I thought this team was a year away at the beginning of 19. I really do think 2020 is where they really start to measure the impact that Jimbo is going to have on the program.
Gary, when you look at this game, what is the one big storyline that you hope to learn about these two teams when they get together in College Station?
Boy, I would say, can someone figure out a way to keep a 8-yard slant pass from turning into a touchdown? Because if you don't do that, how do you have any hope of slowing down this Alabama football team? If you're going to allow Tua, who might be one of the most accurate passers we've seen in college football, with 4 NFL wide receivers on the field, 3 of them that could go in the top 2 rounds next year. Jalen Waddle is probably a year away, so he's the featured guy. But it's a tough matchup for anyone. And I can see kind of almost what the New England Patriots did against, in past games when they played the Buffalo Bills. They need to soften up their zone coverages. They need to move back a little bit. They need to entice the Alabama offense with the look to run the ball. If they listen to what Nick Saban has been saying for the last couple weeks, that he wants his team to be more ball control, I would want to show Nick Saban with every snap that we're daring you to run the ball, do you have enough patience to do it? Because otherwise, if you don't clog those passing lanes on the slants and they get one-on-one, there's just not enough talent in college football to slow down all three of those guys.
And Gary, on the other side, if you think that Texas A&M is going to keep this close and potentially pull off the upset, Kellen Mond's going to have a good game. What have you seen from him 5 games into the season, and what does he need to do, perhaps elevate his game to keep this thing competitive at Kyle Field?
Well, he sure misses his tight ends from a year ago. It was a safety valve that he just was comfortable with, and he doesn't have that. And with the loss of his running back, his first-team running back, he's gone to being just a passing drop-back quarterback, and he's comfortable throwing the ball over the middle of the field. A lot of quarterbacks aren't in college ball, but that's a risky venture. They ran for over 130 yards last year against Alabama in this football game, but Kellen Mond had 98 of the 130. When you put him at risk like that, he's going to take a beating, and you wonder if he can not just last the game physically as if he's going to be knocked out of the game, but you wonder if it's going to have an impact on his passing game. So, he needs a little bit of help, and I predict, Texas A&M is one of the slowest running teams as plays per seconds run. They're one of the slowest teams tempo-wise in all of college football. You wonder, looking at what Alabama's faced with some success by South Carolina and some success moving the ball by Ole Miss with tempo, can Texas A&M with a bye week give them a change-up with a running quarterback? That's really tough for a team that has been deliberate and slow to all of a sudden become a high-tempo team. It leads to mistakes, but, you're looking around. You just can't go into a game and say, this is who we are, we're not going to change anything, we're going to win. But I do wonder, will Jimbo say, no, I want to slow this game down, make it a 60, 65-play game, take my chances with a turnover or a good punt return or something and try to beat them that way? Or we try to emulate what other teams have had some success so far against Alabama and up the tempo? I really think that's the first phase of the game that I'm going to watch in this football game.
It'll be interesting. Vegas has it at 61 points, and to your point, we'll see if Jimbo has an approach there to maybe limit some of those points and have them at a premium. Gary Danielson joining us here. Again, he will have the call, the SEC on CBS. Welcoming now, conversation-wise, Barton Simmons, college football analyst, 24/7 Sports Director of Scouting, joining us here. So let's talk about a few players, Barton, and let's start with the one Bama offensive lineman in Landon Dickerson.
Yeah, I think you go to Landon Dickerson, and I think he's an important piece of this puzzle. And I heard Brady mention this earlier because if you're going to stop this Alabama offense, in a way, it can't really start at defending the wide receivers. It really starts at finding a way to make Tua uncomfortable. You look at the games Alabama struggled in late in the year last year. Anytime a game was close, in part, it was because Tua was under pressure. And I think when Landon Dickerson, a transfer from Florida State, who was a little bit maligned at Florida State, dealt with injuries, he arrived with an attitude at Alabama. And he arrived and inserted some strength, some physicality, and really has been a bonus add to this Alabama offensive line. He may be called on in a larger role than even we've seen to this point. Chris Owens, starting center, may not play this weekend. Landon Dickerson may have to step in at center. So I think for this Alabama offensive line, a little bit of some moving pieces in that puzzle throughout the preseason and the regular season. If they can continue to have that continuity and strength, and if Landon Dickerson can have a really good game, I think that will speak to the success of that Alabama offense.
All right, that is one player to watch. Moving over to the Texas A&M side, who's the one player on offense that you have your eyes on right now?
Yeah, I'm going to go at wide receiver, Courtney Davis, and part of this answer is, look, I mean, obviously Kellen Mond has to have a good game. That goes without saying. He has to play one of his best games of his college football career. But I think the game plan, the blueprint for beating Alabama and for scoring defensively, it's almost consistent year in, year out. So you always have to be able to manage and find and create explosive plays. And I think that's where Courtney Davis comes in. He's got great speed, he's got good size, and he's the type of player that on the perimeter, he's got a chance on a couple of those downfield throws, a couple of those jump ball opportunities. And I think Texas A&M is going to really, especially considering that the run game is a little bit beaten up and not quite at what it wanted to be preseason, especially because the tight end position is not what it wanted to be preseason. You've got to find some big plays in that pass game on the perimeter. And Courtney Davis, I think, may be your best bet at getting them.
Yeah, we've seen Isaiah Spiller not get the amount of carries. Kellen Mond has increased his carries in terms of being a dual threat guy. And on the other side for the Aggies, now I know the secondary at one point was thought to be perhaps a strength for Jimbo Fisher as well, but give me one player you're looking out for here.
Well, I mean, the whole secondary's got to play well with that Alabama wide receiver core coming to town. But I'm pointing to Damani Richardson, who's a true freshman, really talented player, and he's going to be a great one. He's going to be a really good player for Texas A&M. But his strength right now, really more than anything else, is in run support, is in being that eighth body in the box, being a guy that can add a hat in the run game. Obviously, you know, he'll be asked to do that against Alabama, but the real question is, can he match up in the pass game? Can Alabama create some mismatches and get him on one of those wide receivers? And Gary mentioned this, you know, those slants can turn into big plays pretty quickly. And so I think Damani Richardson and really the whole secondary obviously is going to have to really be on his game, because you can't blink with that crew that's coming to town, all those wide receivers. I think this is going to be a real opportunity for Damani Richardson to step up and really earn a skin here as an SEC elite top-tier defender. I think he'll become that one day. I think this is the first step if he can have a good game against Alabama.
And we'll see if the freshman is up to task. Again, a big matchup at Kyle Field at College Station. Barton Simmons, appreciate it as always.
SEC football means Alabama undefeated right now at 5-0, and they are going down to College Station, where the Aggies have been in, let's just say, the College Station triangle. Lost to Clemson, lost to Auburn, and now the third leg. Hello, boys. It's Alabama and the favorite to win the Heisman, Tua Tagovailoa, right now minus 130 to win the award, and rightfully so. 23 touchdowns on the year. Both these teams are off a bye, and both these teams combined last year for 68 points. What's the over and under in this game? A laughable number of 60.5. When I mean love, I absolutely love the over in this game. Talked about Tua. On the flip side, Kellen Mond has been good, but not great. Coming off an impressive game where I think his confidence is going to be sky high. And you know the 12th man is going to be electric. They're going to be energetic. That place is going to be jumping. But one number stands out to me, and that's 0. 0 times has an assistant coach in Nick Saban knocked off the headmaster. I don't expect Texas A&M to win this game. I think it's going to be close, but one thing it's going to be for sure, it's going to be explosive, it's going to be high scoring, and when Alabama averaging over 50 points a game, it is a lock, and I mean lock, to go over.
Our guy Tim Doyle expecting a lot of points, and it's interesting because if you heard from Gary Danielson, he said it might be an approach for Jimbo Fisher. Does he try to be conservative, or does he try to run with Bama? And according to Tim, they're going to try to run and be a shootout here.
I think part of that has to do a little bit, though, with the Alabama defense. I mean, they had some young pieces, they had some injuries before the start of the year, so I think that played a little bit of a factor, too, in this defense, maybe not being as dominant as what we're accustomed to seeing from other Alabama defenses. But again, you know, there's still a lot left out there. They haven't necessarily been tested this year when you look at their previous opponents. So this will be a little bit of a finding out process just to feel how good they actually are on both sides of the football for Alabama. I don't know if that's the best strategy to go with. I think if I'm Jimbo Fisher, I'm going to try to run the football, whether it's Spiller or even incorporating Mond in some of this too. I think in order to beat Alabama, you've got to give them your best shot. And it's going to incorporate them trying to slow down the game and limit their possessions. And so it's really more quality, not necessarily quantity, when you look at these two teams and how you want to go about trying to slow down Tua Tagovailoa. take away some of that time. Don't allow your defense to be too, out on the field too long. Now, I would take a little bit more of a conservative approach. That doesn't mean you're not going to try to put up points.
Right.
It's just how you're going about doing it.
It's interesting to me because they've had the extra time to prepare, but Spillers just had 13 carries in his last 2 games with Arkansas and Auburn, and in the last game, Jimbo used Mon in a rushing form a little bit more. So you've got
He's
to
got
think
the
that
ability to do it.
Right.
And I think if you want to try to jumpstart the rushing attack a little bit, or if you want to provide Nick Saban with some issues, put in some quarterback run game or allow him to scramble, pick up a few first downs. That'll scare any defensive coordinator because now you have to account for him with what you're doing, and it simplifies the looks that they can give you. So I would not be shocked at all if they didn't have to, give Kellen Mond more opportunities, more running, more rushing attempts, but also we're telling him, hey, if nothing's there, take off, get what you can, give us some positive gain, at least to help with momentum or to help add yards onto a punt.
You've talked about it a little bit, Gary touched upon it as well, but I want to expand on Kellen Mond. If he's going to have a big game, which Texas A&M needs for him to be competitive, for them to be competitive,
right.
What does he have to improve on? What do you need to see?
Well, again, it goes back to the turnovers. It's going to be somewhat decision-making. I think that's a piece of it, too. But I think overall, it's not necessarily anything he has to do. I think he has to get help in particular up front. I think if you're looking at the matchup between their offensive line and what Alabama's going to be facing, Alabama should be able to get some pressure on Kellen Mond. So it's another reason why his mobility is going to be important in this case. But outside of that, he's going to have the game of his life. I mean, that's what he's going up against as far as looking at how well Tua's playing this year and then what his defense is going to be up against. So it's not so much what Kellen Mond has to do, play within himself, do the things that I think he's being coached to do and asked to do. It could be enough in this case, but this is the task that he's going up against. This is an Alabama team that puts up a ton of points. So at times, he's going to have to take some calculated risk, and he's going to have to make his most accurate, best throws, best game in order to pull off this upset.
The schedule, as I mentioned, for Texas A&M, playing the #1 team in the country 2 of their first 6 games, and they get a bit of a break, but then on the back end, they're going to have a couple of tough games. And let's end on sort of the strength again. We talk about the receiving core at Alabama averaging 380, and then you got the A&M secondary, which is limited about 200 yards per game. So we're going to have strength versus strength here. It's going to be pretty tough, though, for A&M.
No, it will be. And I think, again, you got to give credit to the defensive coordinator, Mike Elko, on the job he does. I mean, he mixes up coverages. He runs sometimes even some combo coverages where on one side it may look like man, the other side it looks like zone. That's tough for a lot of quarterbacks when they're dropping back looking at that because a lot of times your reads are predicated on is a zone, is a man. Is there 1 high safety, is there 2 high safety? So when you can mix up those looks, you slow down Tua Tagovailoa, and he has a hard time getting the football to these talented wide receivers on the outside if he doesn't necessarily know what he's getting from the defense. So that can be one way I think the secondary for A&M can slow down this passing attack is, again, and Barton touched on it, and something I alluded to earlier. If you get pressure or you can slow down the thought process of Tua Tagovailoa, make him second-guess himself like we saw in the national championship game, I think that's the only way you can create some issues for this passing attack.
Vegas thinks Alabama will win this game by more than 2 touchdowns. Let's just say conservatively that they get a win either way.
It's a big number. That's a big number for me for SEC football and Alabama playing on the road. I mean, I like them to win this. I like them to win this by 2 touchdowns, but 17 points, it's a little much for me. Alabama wins this game. I think A&M can cover that spread, though.
Big picture for Alabama. They're going to be grouped in with the Georgias, the LSUs now, and then potentially Florida, though we'll see what Florida and LSU will do this weekend. What's the gap between Alabama and the rest of the SEC, which we consider the power conference in the country?
I don't think it's very big when you look at LSU and Georgia. Now, when you start incorporating everyone else, I think then there's a little bit of a next tier below that group of 3. But if you look at the passing attack right now of LSU with Joe Burrow, to match with how good they are defensively, the rushing attack has been consistent. That's going to be a big time challenge. Now, granted, Alabama gets to host LSU, so they've got that to their advantage. And they wouldn't have to meet Georgia until the SEC championship game. So a little bit extra time to prepare and obviously rest up. But that's a team where I think if you're Alabama, if you're worried about an opponent, to me it might be Georgia. I mean, they've got the athletes to match you as far as what they present defensively. That O-line's a beast to go up against the way they're running the football. They can really control the game. And Jake Fromm is a good game manager, but when he needs to step up, he can step up in the big moments. So that's one. It's an interesting matchup. I'm curious to see that one, and then I'm curious to see how LSU ends up challenging them because that is a team that can keep up with them point for point, blow for blow as far as throwing based on what we've seen so far from Joe Burrow.
Yeah, I watched that LSU-Utah State game where I thought the Aggies, I think we all thought they were going to kind of keep it close.
I thought maybe a backdoor cover. Maybe see Jordan Love.
Jordan Love struggled, man. He could not get anything done in that
But that
game.
speaks to their defense. And by the way, that's a pretty good defensive front. You know, that's a team that's going to do all right in Mountain West. And they're really up front. Their offensive line showed me some. There was no one around Joe Burrow that entire game. And
then on the Georgia side, real quick, we know Kirby Smart can get the dudes, but in game, are you having any more confidence that in-game management will be there?
That's going to be the biggest question. And we honestly won't know until that game occurs because, you know, the SEC East is a little bit weaker when you're looking at, you know, what they have to get through in order to get to the SEC championship game. So I don't even know how much they'll be challenged this year.
All right. That's Brady Quinn. I'm Tommy Tran. That was the SEC Super Preview brought to you by CBS Sports HQ. Coming up next.